Have you ever wondered why Gen X seems harder to fool than most people? Why they're often the first to question a trend, doubt a promise, or keep their distance from someone who seems too good to be true? It's not because they're negative. It's not because they're cynical. And it's definitely not because they don't trust anyone. The truth is far more interesting. Generation X learned a lesson about human nature that completely changed the way they see trust. A lesson that many people don't discover until much later in life. And once you understand it, you'll begin to see why Gen X approaches people, relationships, and promises very differently from most generations today. Because what looks like distrust is often something else entirely. It's experience, it's observation, and it's a mindset that still shapes Generation X to this day. Most people assume trust is something that happens naturally. You meet someone, you like them, you get along, and over time a friendship forms. Simple. But Gen X often approaches that process differently. They don't automatically assume that a good first impression means a trustworthy person. In fact, many members of Generation X have spent their entire lives watching people prove that first impressions can be wrong. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone say all the right things, but do the exact opposite? How many times have promises sounded convincing until reality arrived? How many times have appearances hidden the truth? Gen X has seen those situations countless times, and eventually a pattern began to emerge. People can fake words, people can fake confidence, people can fake charm, but consistency is much harder to fake. That's why many Gen X adults don't focus on what people say. They focus on what people repeatedly do. And that small difference changes everything. And this may explain something that many people notice about Generation X. They often seem unusually good at spotting fake people, not because they have a special talent, and not because they're constantly looking for flaws. It's because they've spent years paying attention to behavior rather than presentation. Most people focus on what someone says. Gen X often focuses on what someone repeats. A single action can be accidental. A pattern usually isn't. That's why many Gen X adults can sense when something feels off long before they can explain why. They may not have proof yet, but they've seen enough human behavior to recognize familiar patterns. And more often than not, those instincts turn out to be correct. Here's something many people never notice. Generation X grew up in a world where reputation wasn't created overnight. If someone wanted to earn trust, they usually had to do it the old-fashioned way, through behavior, through reliability, through showing up consistently. And because of that, Gen X became extremely good at spotting the gap between image and reality. They learned to watch, to listen, to observe. Not because they were suspicious, because experience taught them that observation reveals things excitement often hides. This is why Gen X can sometimes seem quiet when everyone else is rushing toward the latest trend. They're not necessarily rejecting it. They're evaluating it. This is also one reason Gen X rarely falls for hype as easily as other people. When a new trend appears, they don't immediately ask, "How exciting is this?" They ask, "How long will this last?" That's a very different question. Excitement focuses on the present. Experience focuses on outcomes. And after seeing countless trends rise and disappear, many Gen X adults became comfortable waiting before making a decision. They know that what looks revolutionary today may be forgotten tomorrow. And because of that, they often avoid mistakes that happen when people confuse excitement with value. They've learned that every exciting opportunity sounds good in the beginning. The real question is what happens after the excitement fades. Does it still make sense? Does it still hold up? Does it still deserve trust? Those questions have guided Generation X for decades. And perhaps that's one reason they often appear more difficult to fool than other people. But there's another side to this story that rarely gets discussed. Many people assume trust is something you either have or you don't. For Gen X, trust often works more like a test. Not an official test, not something written down, but a quiet process of observation. Most Gen X adults won't immediately tell you they're evaluating someone. In fact, they may appear completely relaxed, friendly, polite, easygoing, yet at the same time, they're paying attention. They're noticing whether someone's actions remain consistent from one situation to another. Because one thing Generation X learned early in life is that character usually reveals itself over time. Anyone can behave well when things are easy. The real test comes when life becomes complicated, when pressure appears, when expectations aren't met, when mistakes happen. That's when people often reveal who they really are. And Gen X knows this. Perhaps that's why many members of Generation X don't rush important relationships. Whether it's friendship, business, or trust, they understand that time often reveals things excitement cannot. And here's what's fascinating. The longer someone proves themselves reliable, the stronger Gen X trust often becomes. Because trust that is earned slowly tends to be valued more deeply. But here's where things get even more interesting. The common stereotype says Gen X doesn't trust anyone. Yet many of the strongest and longest-lasting friendships you'll ever see belong to members of Generation X. So how can both things be true? The answer is simple. Gen X doesn't avoid trust. They delay trust. There's a huge difference. Avoiding trust means refusing connection. Delaying trust means allowing time to reveal character. And that's exactly what many Gen X adults do. They understand that real trust isn't built during impressive moments. It's built during ordinary moments. The moments when nobody is trying to impress anyone. The moments when life becomes inconvenient. The moments when promises are tested. Because that's when people reveal who they really are. And once Gen X sees consistency, something interesting happens. Their loyalty often becomes incredibly strong. The same people who seem cautious at first can become some of the most dependable friends you'll ever have. Because trust, once earned, means something to them. It isn't casual, it isn't temporary, and it isn't based on convenience. It's based on proof. Another interesting trait of Generation X is the way they view loyalty. In today's world, popularity often receives more attention than loyalty. People are encouraged to build networks, increase visibility, expand connections. But many Gen X adults tend to value something different. Dependability. The person who keeps their word. The friend who shows up when nobody else does. The colleague who remains consistent year after year. These qualities may not attract headlines, but they create trust, and trust creates lasting relationships. There's another difference that often goes unnoticed. Many people today chase attention. Generation X often chases respect. Attention can be gained quickly. Respect usually takes years. Attention comes from being noticed. Respect comes from being trusted. And for many members of Generation X, trust has always mattered more than visibility. Perhaps that's why they often care less about impressing people and more about proving themselves through actions. Because deep down, respect lasts much longer than attention ever will. There's also a modern reason why Gen X sometimes appears different today. We live in a world that moves faster than ever. Opinions form quickly. Relationships move quickly. Trends appear and disappear quickly. And in many ways, trust is expected to happen quickly too. But Gen X often operates on a different timeline. They still believe that some things can't be rushed. Respect can't be rushed. Character can't be rushed. And trust certainly can't be rushed. Perhaps that's why Gen X often seems different. Not because they trust less, but because they've learned that trust has value. And valuable things aren't given away carelessly. They're earned. The truth is, Gen X doesn't spend its time looking for perfect people. It looks for consistent people. People whose actions match their words. People who prove themselves over time. And maybe that's why so many members of Generation X still approach trust differently today. Not because they're closed off, not because they're cynical, but because experience taught them that trust means something. I'm curious about your experience. Do you think Gen X became more careful with trust over time, or has this always been part of the generation's personality? Let us know what you think.